Question every wrestler has in their head right now: how much can a wrestler actually expect to be paid? Because folks, coming up on June 23rd in Ashburn, Virginia is the Claw Invitational.
We're talking with a company now that is promising us that in year one we can have betting, and related to that is fantasy. We have to have quality fantasy leagues. Another innovation that we did is called the quick score bonus, because this is different. If you score in the first 15 seconds of any round, you get an extra point. And we view this as a business. It's a media and entertainment property. It just happens to use wrestling.
The rule that's at the top of everyone's mind, and if you can just clarify the Pylon rule, because that's the big... Why would you not support this league? We're talking paid professional wrestling. All right, folks, welcome back to BEG Wrestling. We are here with an exclusive interview with Tom Howe, the co-founder and commissioner of the new professional paid wrestling league, folks, Claw Wrestling. Tom, welcome to the show, and thank you for coming on here to talk about the new professional league. Tell us how excited you are for this.
Thanks for having me, and I don't get to say we are here.
Oh, you want to do it again? We are here. That's right. Hey, we appreciate it.
That's why I came.
That's the only reason he came, folks. No, but hey, I have a lot of questions. I know everyone has a lot of questions about this new professional wrestling league starting in 2025, and questions they should have. And folks, we're here to answer them for you. Now, we're going to break them down into three main categories, starting with the rule changes and new scoring, and then the marketing and advertising, why this will work, and then wrestlers' pay and free agency. So, Tom, I guess just to start it off, the most burning question on the top of my head would be, what exactly are the rule changes, and how did you get to these changes? What testing and research did you go through?
So we didn't want to create a new sport. We know that we have to make wrestling faster paced, more action, more scoring, more fan engagement to attract a broader audience. If this is ever going to be successful, we have to broaden the audience. So we wanted all those things, but we didn't want to create a new sport. So we really started with folk style and freestyle and said, what do people like about those? And we want more of that. And what do people not like or complain about or find boring or confusing? We want less of that. And we sort of merged them together into a hybrid style. And then we added in some innovations of our own. But kind of before we even got to that, we did a lot of research on fan psychology and what makes a great spectator sport, regarding wrestling. And we learned so much. And there's obvious things like fans want more action and scoring and great storylines and all that. But we learned about fans like the armchair quarterback and Monday morning quarterback. And there's not a lot of opportunities for that in wrestling. So how could we incorporate some of that? Fans like situational diversity. And that's it's not the same thing over and over. And so you compare freestyle versus folk style, and freestyle, besides a little bit of mat wrestling with usually gut wrenches and leg laces, it's mainly a takedown tournament. And so folk style has a little more situational diversity. Fans like stats. You look at baseball and they have a stat for everything. I just watching a game the other night, Andrew McCutcheon ran around the bases in 9 point something, or was it 19 seconds or 9? I forget what it was, but they keep track of how long.
We love stats and analytics. Can't get enough of those.
And there's not a lot of that in wrestling. So we've come up with dozens of new stats and ways to rank wrestlers, because even in baseball, sometimes they'll show a stat. This guy's hitting 365 on Saturday afternoon games in the month of May. And sometimes you're like, it's like a cherry pick stat there.
Baseball's made for stats. Yeah, I mean, they're built off stats.
But even if you think I like that, that's kind of lame. It's like you were just engaged. Instead of sitting there being bored between pitches, you were engaged. So we obviously want to have useful stats, but more stats and more of everything that fans really want. So we sort of combined all this research into our rule set, lots of brainstorming, lots of debating, and then lots of testing. We've tested our rules at over 60 D1 or senior level matches, and refined them each time, and we continue to test them up until the league gets going. But the results are really encouraging. 2.5 times more scoring than in a typical NCAA match.
2.5 times more. Wow.
And,
okay.
And fans,
Research
surveys,
shows.
we've surveyed fans and athletes, and 100% unanimous. It's more exciting. There's more action. There's more scoring. It's more fun to watch. So that's all encouraging. But we continue to tweak, as we do more work.
Well, I mean, I would completely agree about the element of the stats. And how wrestling, we need more stats, man. I'm a stat guy. You've mentioned on the mat, research and testing. And I know you kind of mentioned even off the mat, like some books that your research team has kind of read to kind of guide you to be this more fan interactive experience. Is there anything you want to touch on as far as kind of the off the mat research that was done for this?
Yeah, we did so much research on other sports, other leagues, the big major sports that everybody knows. There's a lot written on them. But also there's so many alternative sports now, with the internet, just anything and everything. I mean, there's professional tag leagues and and not wrestling. That's the huge shame. There's still nothing for wrestling. But we tried to learn from, the past attempts to do wrestling, from leagues that have failed, and just look at all the best practices and all the things that sort of brought them down and incorporate that all into a comprehensive business plan that addresses all the critical, factors that's needed for a professional league. You just can't do a card or put a series of cards together and call it a league. A real professional league these days has all kinds of components. And we just felt like we got to address them all and we got to do it right. We weren't going to do this unless we were going to do it right. We didn't want to do a second rate or let's do a little bit and then figure it out sort of deal. We want to hit with a splash, do it right, and hopefully people will love it because there's skepticism with wrestling fans. They've seen the attempts in the past. It's a one and done sort of thing. And with athletes and with fans, here comes another league, And so we really want to make sure we do it right, that it has staying power, that we have the financial capital, to make it work. And it's got to be commercially viable. It has to make money. And we view this as a business. It's a media and entertainment property that just happens to use wrestling, as opposed to, and maybe this has happened in the past, wrestling's great. We love it. And if more people knew about it, and there should be a professional league for wrestling, let's show that. And we kind of started backwards, like, what do fans want? What do customers want? We're all businessmen first, not lifelong wrestling coaches or anything. And so what do the customers want and how can we deliver it to them? So that affected rules and pretty much every other decision we've made.
Yeah. Wow. Fascinating. I mean, so 2.5 times more scoring on average. I mean, and you mentioned all this research, just like how much research, how much time have you guys been at this?
Oh, I think hundreds and hundreds of hours. I mean, I've been full-time for almost 2 years now.
Wow.
And
okay. This is no joke.
My partner, Eric Brugel, he's a former All-American at Penn State. He spends a lot of time. He has a full-time job in the investment world, but he spends a lot of time on this as well. And then eventually we'll be hiring, full-time people as we get a little closer to launch, which is still a year away.
Okay. Wow. So over 2 years of research and testing and data tracking here. Now, I want to get into a little bit more specifically about the rules. So I think the rule that's at the top of everyone's mind, and if you can just clarify the Pylon rule, because that's the big. I mean, you mentioned wrestling fans are skeptical. The one thing I want to say, I think you're doing it the right way by looking at this as a business, as a show. I think that's what the NFL does right. So I agree with you on that. But this Pylon rule, give us some clarification on this Pylon.
So it definitely gets the most attention. It really started off with a long history of it, but it started off with some fans in our research said it would be nice if there was another way for the person on bottom to score instead of just, quad potting up or the guy cutting them. Occasionally you see a Granby or something, but mat wrestling in general, that's one of the complaints some people have about folk style is that it's boring. So we have a variety of ways to address that. But one of them, long story short, ended up being the Pylon. And the Pylon, it's like an orange pylon, in football. And, if you think about it as sort of the opposite of a push out, if you can push somebody out of bounds in freestyle, you get a point. So we're like, oh, can we do something like that for mat wrestling? If you could get the guy out of bounds, could you get a point? And then we're like, well, it's kind of easy for the top person because you could just, if they get to their feet, pick them up and take them off. But we're like, well, what if the bottom person can get out of bounds? So when it originally started, it was if the bottom person can get out of bounds, if the top person can't control them enough, they can get out of bounds and hit out of bounds, they get a point. But optically and from a fan viewership, it's not that exciting to see a guy just do that. And I was watching the NFL one day, and there's one of these slow motion shots of the guy diving towards the end zone with the ball, hitting the pylon. And I'm like, pylons,
we've all seen those.
Pylons. So we started experimenting with it. And when people first see it, it's this novel thing, and it seems gimmicky, and it's kind of goofy. Well, you're really going to have like props on the mat. But once you've seen it, like I've seen it in over 60 matches now, it's just wrestling. The top person
added
has,
element.
Like we often hear, hey, it's not fair if somebody loses because some dude knocked down a pylon. And it's like, well, don't let him knock it down then.
That's right. Don't let him get out from the bottom. Yeah.
So it really takes control. They often say folk style is about control to a new level because you can't just let the guy go wherever he wants on the mat. And it takes mat awareness to a new level too. When you're mat wrestling, you need to know where the pylon is. And in case anybody doesn't know, if the bottom person is able to knock down one of these pylons, there's 3 of them on the edge of the mat, they get a point. The top person can also knock it down and preemptively take it away. So if they can swat it away first or kick it away first, and it just makes mat wrestling way more interesting. Because, think about in a folk style match, if this is the end of the mat and some guys are wrestling here and a guy on top is a claw ride and the bottom guy's not doing much, it can be boring. Mm-hmm. But if there's a pylon right here, all of a sudden there's a point in play.
Yeah.
And it becomes a lot more interesting. So what from our surveys, non-wrestling people think it's the best part of our rules. They love it. They understand it.
That's interesting.
Don't always understand what a takedown is or the scoring in freestyle. But if you can bat down a pylon, they get it. But even wrestling fans, once sort of the novelty of it wears off, it's like, this is awesome. It makes it better. It's more fun to watch. Only the super purists so far, like the people who don't like the pitch clock in baseball, are like, that's not wrestling. Oh, it's actually more wrestling because you really have to control the person.
That's a great perspective. And yeah, you're always going to be fighting the people who don't like change. Now, pylon cams? Is there any chance of getting pylon cams?
Yes.
Are you serious?
Absolutely.
All right. Now that's what I'm talking about.
They're expensive. So they're more expensive than we thought.
So don't knock them down too hard, right?
Well, if you get good ones, you can knock them down. But in the meantime, not for our event in June, but when the league starts, we'll at least have little mini cams stationed near the pylons. The Big Ten Network did some of that this year too.
Yeah.
And so when the guys are diving towards the pylon, you can see them coming right at you. We're going to have ref cams too.
Wow. Okay. Cool. Ref cams, maybe some mice. Well, the UFL's doing drone. They're flying drones for the football games now. So I love it. I'm totally into and open to the pylon cams. I do want to clarify some of the other scoring. So because team scoring is different in this league. So explain to me exactly how the team scoring is kept.
So the matches are dual meets. So 7 wrestlers, 7 weight classes. And if you win, so every point you score gets credited to your team. So you don't have like a major decision at 8. And there are tech falls. If you get a 15-point lead, the match will end. And there's pins, of course. But every point you score counts for your team. So if you win by 1 point versus you win by 5 points, that's a difference in team score. So basically in our rules, you get 5 points if you win, and then your margin of victory. So if you win by 1 point, you get 6 points for your team. You win by 12 points, you're going to get 12 plus 5, 17 points for your team.
Wow.
It's really, Wade
15?
Chalice, a tech fall 15, yep.
Pin? What's a pin?
So you get 25 points.
25 for a pin? Yeah. Wow. Okay. So more points, folks. More scoring, more points.
And you just get the margin of victory. So if you pin me, it'd be 25-0 if we were the first match. Wade Chalice has advocated for this type of team scoring forever. He calls it a point scored as a point earned. And that's really where we got the first idea from Wade, who has so many great ideas. But
you say it like that, it makes a lot of sense.
There's always an incentive to score. And the wrestlers get paid not only for winning, but for their team winning. So if you're going to be a 1-point guy, you're perhaps costing yourself money and your teammates money.
Wow.
They might not be happy about that.
Even furthermore, to increase action and decrease stalling. So why don't you talk a little bit about how you guys are going to handle stalling?
So, stalling now is a problem. Not only is it called inconsistently amongst different refs, but the rules allow it to happen for extended periods and sometimes even encourage it to action. So if you think, so we have a different approach to stalling. Maybe I shouldn't say completely, but it's a different approach. So, now you get to stall for a while. And if you stall long enough, the ref will hold up his hand and give you the stall warning. And there's your free pass. So you can stall for a while until you get the stall call.
There's always a warning.
It's allowed. Yeah. Then you can stall some more, right? Until they're finally going to hit you with a point. And refs do it differently. So what we don't want these extended periods of where people aren't doing anything. So in our case, if you're not actively aggressive, we want the match to be more of like a sprint at the end of the match. When somebody's losing by 1 point with 20 seconds to go, it's very different than at the beginning when there's a staring contest and a bunch of level change fakes.
Yeah.
They're getting after it. So that's what we want all the time. Our matches are only 5 minutes, so it's shorter. We want it to be more of a sprint.
Okay.
But if somebody's not actively, aggressively trying to score or improve their position, they're going to get warned for stalling by either ref. The second ref is called the action judge. So in addition to the normal second ref duties, he can call stalling. So they're both watching for stalling. And the warning isn't a fist up in the air. This is like if you're not doing something for 5 seconds, you're going to get a fist pointed at you. And the ref's going to say like action red. And basically it's you're on the shot clock. I don't think you're doing anything. You're not actively wrestling. You better do something quick or you're getting hit. And you have a short period of time, depends on the exact situation.
Sure.
But to start wrestling like you're trying to score or improve your position. And if you do that, the warning goes away. I can warn you 10 seconds late. I can give unlimited warnings. Now, if I'm constantly warning you and pulling it back, eventually we're going to award points because you're kind of playing the game.
Yeah. No games though.
But if you don't do something, the arm will go up. And both refs, because it's called much more aggressively, the wrestlers who've done it are like, what? You're calling me for stalling already? They just put their forearm down on their thigh for a second. And
wow. Okay.
Allowed. You're backing up, not allowed.
Yeah.
Start doing something. So it's very aggressive, stalemates too. And then it's a point. Then it goes to 2 points. And after, if you get to the 6, you're disqualified. There's many, many matches that I watch on TV freestyle at the Olympic trials, at folk style, where the guys would be disqualified by the second period under our rules. You're coming if you're not coming to wrestle, don't be in claw because the refs are going to make sure you wrestle.
You better bring it, folks. You better bring it to claw if you're going to be in claw. So just to clarify, 5-minute matches. How many periods?
4 periods. We call them rounds to make it a little more familiar with MMA people. And the big thing is you win the match by winning the most number of rounds. So whoever wins the most rounds wins, regardless of total points. Now, the points still matter. A lot of people will say, oh, that's how freestyle used to be. Well, there's 4 rounds, which is different. And then the points still count, though, because it counts. So we keep track of the total points accumulated during the match.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to win the most number of rounds to win the match. So if you beat me 3 rounds to 1 and the final score, you had 9 points and I had 6, you'll win the match, but you're going to get your 3 points margin of victory plus your 5 for winning.
Yeah.
So
okay.
It's very simple once there's so much information with it takes
you're just going to have to see
minutes,
it. You got to see it.
You catch on quickly.
What about one final just clarification? Say it's 2 rounds to 2. Now, how is that determined?
So there is overtime. It's 30 seconds sudden victory. So our mats are square. So we do have push outs without grounding because that can be confusing to people watching for the first time. But so square mat, but for overtime, there's a smaller square in the center that's like 9 by 9. And so the push out area becomes a lot smaller. You start in an over under body lock position with the clinch. But you can push them out. You can take them down. overtime needs to be swift, exciting, and dramatic. We know some of the most exciting things about wrestling are upper body battles, right? So we're not going to leave it to chance. We're forcing them in an upper body battle for overtime. We talked about many other ways to do it, and that's what we decided on. But so far it's exciting. If nobody gets a takedown and nobody gets a push out, whoever loses their grip first, would lose the match.
Called the clinch. Have you considered calling that the claw?
We have not, but we'll put that on the list.
I mean, that's the overtime, the claw overtime. I mean, to me,
like that.
All right, folks, let's clarify. We have 5-minute matches, 4 rounds. You win the most rounds to win the match, cumulative points. In general, 2.5 times more scoring, and no stalling warnings. So did I say that all right? Is that all correct? One final question, if it is, the weight classes.
And just regarding what you just said, you do have those quick warnings.
The quick warnings.
It's a different type of warning.
It's not like a warning in another 30 seconds. It's like a hard, like the clock is on, and until they remove the fist, boom, you're either getting action going or giving a point to the other opponent. But but the weight classes for each team.
So our June tournament starts at 135 and goes up to 250, basically by roughly 10 increments. We have 8 classes at this invitational we're doing in June, but the league will have 7 weight classes, and a lot of thought went into that. Little inside baseball here, but we want to have doubleheader events, and our typical event will be 2 mats side by side and a doubleheader. So you get to see your favorite team or favorite wrestler twice, and there's always, that's just, if
action.
you got one mat and there's blood time or, our official reviews, by the way, will be limited, and if they haven't decided in 60 seconds, the call stands. So the refs are on a timer.
I like that.
We're going to encourage the fans to count down 10, 9, 8 when it gets to the end. If you guys haven't figured it out by now, it's not indisputable.
I agree with that.
Look at these sports.
That's a common mistake everyone's made with these replays.
They don't understand what indisputable means.
They're on for 5 minutes. Yeah, if you have to look at it that many times, that's slow. Yeah, it's not that close. But all right. So I think we clarified all the rule changes and some new scoring. I want to get into more of the marketing and advertising end now.
Hey, could I mention one other rule?
Go ahead.
Real quick? So another innovation that we did is called the quick score bonus, because this is different. If you score in the first 15 seconds of any round, you get an extra point. So 3-point take. We still have 2-point takedowns, but it could be a 3-point takedown. But where it's really created a lot more action. So some guys on the whistle will shoot and be aggressive right off the bat.
Oh yeah.
But where it's really created more action is on the mat, because if you can get out in 15 seconds, you get 2 points for your escape. Or if you can get to a pylon in 15 seconds and knock it down and then escape, you can get 3 points on the bottom. And the mat, our periods are a minute and a half, minute and a half. And the second and third periods have to start in referee's position. So it's a minute period. So if you can do that, you have a significant edge in winning that round. And so it just creates no more of this bracing and taking your time. It's like, boom, right on the whistle, guys are going.
Bonus points for scoring within the first 15 seconds. Wow.
We don't want guys to wait to the last end of the round to try to win the round.
You don't have time in this.
Yeah.
A minute and a half, you better go. You only have time to go. But all right, sounds fast, exciting, more scoring. I mean, double headers. I mean, we're taking the slow wrestling style and we're making it fast and fan-friendly, folks. But back into the marketing advertising. So there's been these previous attempts in the past for professional wrestling. Tell me just your overall why this is different than the previous attempts. Why will this work?
Well, first of all, hats off to anybody who's tried this before. It's hard to launch a professional league of any nature, and I'm sure the people worked extremely hard, maybe put up their own money. Real Pro Wrestling was a league about roughly 20 years or so ago, and it was nicely done, but it didn't last. But they put a lot of money into that, and so all that's valuable because it allows us to see what's been tried in the past and hopefully learn from it and say we might do that differently. But I think, I mean, I would say in general, this idea that we're business people first and just using wrestling as our product is different than, and this might not be true. This might not be fair to the past attempts, but it's more wrestling people trying to showcase wrestling and then hoping that people will like it. And they made some changes too to try to, make it more fan friendly. But we've challenged all assumptions about everything. It's one of my core philosophies is, if you're going to innovate, you have to challenge assumptions. And human beings assume all kinds of stuff without even knowing it. So if you look at, running a professional wrestling league, there'll be tons of things that people just naturally assume, oh, you got to do this, you got to do that. You do it that way without even thinking. So I think, the innovation process is sort of systematically, in a disciplined way, identifying all your assumptions and challenging everything. It's really hard for people who've been in wrestling their whole life, sort of in the wrestling bubble, to realize, this is just how it's done. And so we really try to come at it from a fresh perspective. And again, think about things holistically, because we are business people. We've started a lot of businesses in our careers and worked on lots of business plans. And so that, hopefully that affects, the whole product, because so many things have to be done right, for a league to succeed. It's not just about having great wrestlers or changing the rules, or like I said before, putting on a card. And then I think today, another advantage we have today is just, the different types of marketing techniques that are available. So, I mean, we're looking at things like geofencing, and retargeting, all the digital media and digital marketing stuff, that wasn't available in the past. But I mean, I just learned about geofencing in the past year, but, we can put a digital fence around an event, New Jersey States, or Fargo or NHSCA duels, and then, send targeted ads to all their phones about Claw at a pretty reasonable price. And that's awesome because we can do it for MMA events or any other, as we expand our audience, any other target market groups that we want to attract. And that's awesome because, I mean, there's almost 1 million kids who wrestle in the United States, and the vast majority of them do not watch college wrestling and even less freestyle. And that's crazy. I mean, I've been a youth coach and I talk to the kids and they're talking about, their favorite basketball player or something. And I'm like, it makes me sick, dude. I mean, what about, did you watch the Iowa Penn State match the other night? No, I was watching the Lakers. I'm like, I mean, that's disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to me that, okay, if you look outside of the United States, what are the most popular sports outside of the United States? You have soccer, like basketball, wrestling's certainly a top 5 professional sport in every country outside of the United States. And then you come to the United States, it's not even a professional sport in the United States. I mean, tell me how that makes sense. But
it's crazy.
So you talked about some like target level marketing and geocoding. It kind of leads me to my question. I like making bets on sports. Is there any chance or opportunity in the future that I'm going to be able to bet on a professional wrestler to win a match in your league?
Yes, absolutely. We're talking with a company now that is promising us that in year 1 we can have betting.
Year 1?
In year 1, which we did not expect. We thought it would take a couple years of building up stats and data and stuff. But because of some of the stats that are out there in the wrestling community already, and they think they can be able to make odds in year 1, and the people will be able to bet.
Let's go, folks. That's what I'm talking about, baby. We're going to be able to bet on. Oh, now that's a game changer to me. As a, what am I? Millennial? I don't even know. Millennial? Hey, if I have the ability to bet, all of a sudden, I mean, I watch stuff now that I don't even, I only watch it because I have a bet on it.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
yes,
So there's a whole different
absolutely.
level of engagement. So your target level marketing.
And related to that is fantasy. We have to have quality fantasy leagues, and we're planning
Absolutely.
different fantasy options for adults and different fantasy options for kids that are more kid friendly to get kids hooked. And because it's the same thing with gambling, right? Kids are watching NFL games about teams they don't even care anything about because they got somebody on their fantasy team. So both of those are critical, and they have to be high quality and done right. We got to hit that out of the park.
Yeah, I agree. Wow. I mean, that just as you know, the younger generation. I don't know if I even qualify anymore. Fantasy sports and gambling, just two complete game changers that they didn't have them back 20 years ago, folks. That alone, to me, that alone convinces me alone. But let's talk about the enhanced fan experience. So you mentioned the pylons. We got some pylon cams, maybe some different mics. Have you considered maybe adding sound effects or crowd noise to enhance? I mean, as far as the visual experience, maybe some marketing or rights affiliation as far as the video and streaming and all that.
So, in terms of, so to address one of those issues, we're going to go on tour. So our teams do not have geographical hometowns. They're not based in a particular place.
Okay.
So we're going to go on tour like several other professional leagues do. And that will enable us to find the communities that really support this. Then eventually there could be a franchise or team there. But in the meantime, we'll go to the hotbeds of wrestling. So I'm based in Northern Virginia and have a lot of connections in the Washington, D.C. area. So the D.C. area will probably be one of the sites of the tour. Pittsburgh is another obvious area. Southeast Pennsylvania, Central Pennsylvania, Jersey, Ohio.
I'll go out to Iowa City for you if you want.
There's a bunch.
No, I'm just saying, John. I'm just saying. All right, sorry.
Iowa,
keep going.
But we want to find these hotbeds and go there. And then we expect, related to your question, to have full arenas. We know we can't fill like a 16,000 seat arena off the bat, but we're looking at not high school gyms, but smaller high-end arenas. So like in the DC here, there's the Entertainment and Sports Arena where the Washington Mystics play. Mm-hmm. Seats about 4,000 people, but it's beautiful. It's just like, a high-end, is it the MCI Center? Whatever where the Capitals and Wizards play in DC. I don't go to basketball games or hockey, I guess.
You better not be.
But in Pittsburgh at Duquesne University, there's the Cooper UPMC Fieldhouse, which seats like 4,200, I think. And it's gorgeous.
Oh, yeah.
It's like high end. They got club box, they got suites. And so those are the types of places we want to go to. And then we have to have a grassroots marketing, working with local wrestling leaders, to fill those stands so that we won't need pumped in or fake crowd noise. It's going to be loud. It's going to be raucous. And we're going to do things to make sure that happens. So even at Rec Hall for Penn State meets, there's been some criticism about how quiet it gets at times. You got 6,500 people there and you can hear a pin drop. And so we're not going to leave that to chance. We're hiring crowd energizers, what we call them, just like in European soccer. And if you watch, when you watch Iranians wrestle in a match, they're chanting, they're singing, they're banging drums.
Oh, yeah, that's where it's at.
This stuff isn't left to chance. Somebody has to organize it. And so that's what we're going to do to make a great in-person experience. And then online, that's a different issue and how you get fans to engage and make it more interesting. But we're thinking about all those things.
Yeah.
Plans for all those things.
Well, I mean, it kind of reminds me of like a lot of college basketball arenas. They're designed for a crowd of about 4,000. And man, that experience, it kind of reminds me of what Duke's arena was at Coach K. I mean, that you get that kind of feel and hype and energy. Yeah, that would be.
It's got to be fun even if you don't like wrestling or it's your first time. You got to go and have an enjoyable experience, and that's not usually the case with wrestling now. I went to an event. I won't name it, but in this past year it was a big event, and it's like there wasn't a program. You didn't even know who was wrestling. If you were new to wrestling, you'd have no idea what's going on. It's kind of like, hey, here's high-level wrestling, and if you like it, great, and if you don't, too bad.
If you know it, you know it. If you don't, you don't.
We got to bring in people who, don't know. Like, you got to leave saying that was great, and I'd go to a wrestling event again, even though I've never been to one before.
So, say I can't come to a live event, am I going to be able to watch this on TV?
Yeah. So we will definitely. The whole distribution options, has been a very time-consuming thing, evaluating that. Unlikely that we'll get some big TV contract, with ESPN, or Fox Sports in year one. But there's other options. A lot of alternative professional sports have their own platforms now where you can do pay-per-view or you can be a subscriber and get all the events once you subscribe, have access to all the events live and everything else that we'll be broadcasting. Pre-game press conferences, post-game. We'll have footage in the locker room with the guys, come through the tunnel.
Wow.
All unprecedented fan access to the athletes. And that might be housed on our own website, and you might subscribe for a very modest fee, or you might just tune in for pay-per-view events. But in addition to that, that's all kind of behind a paywall. We have to make it available for free as well, to expand the audience. Because some people, even if there's a free trial, they don't want to sign up, and they would have to know about it. So we just want it on normal TV. So we're actually in discussions now with a company that provides a lot of content on these fast TV channels, like so on Roku, Fire Stick, Apple TV. There's all these stations like Freevee and I forget
Fubo. There's so many.
Yes, and so we're pretty confident right now that like our June event is going to be on free TV, on the internet, so that anybody can watch it, and then we'll stream it and stuff ourselves as well and make it available. But so hopefully someday that leads to a TV contract. But in the meantime, you'll be able to watch it, pay to get it live, and all kinds of extra premium content. Or you might watch it tape delayed free on TV, or there's various options out there.
Okay, folks, better experience, more action. You're going to be able to gamble on it. You're going to be able to watch it on TV. Now, it brings me to my final topic, the burning question every wrestler has in their head right now. How much can a wrestler actually expect to be paid?
Well, when the league starts, our budgets now have, the top guys probably making 30, 40, 50,000 a year. Now that's just for 3 or 4 events. So I didn't mention this, but there's 6 teams and they'll all wrestle each other once. So the first regular season will be a 5-meet season. And then there's playoffs. So depending how you do will determine if you make the playoffs. Every match has to have consequences, which doesn't happen now in wrestling, right? It doesn't matter.
We talked about that.
So anyway, there's playoffs and there's seeding, and you got to be eligible for the playoffs. But 5 regular season duels, and they're double headers. So it's basically they only have to come 3 or 4 times, and they'll have the opportunity to make 30, 40, 50,000, depending on who they are. And
wait, I'm sorry to interrupt, but can you say that again? How many times they actually have to wrestle and how much money they can make?
Yeah, so 3, 4 if they make the 3 times if they make the playoffs 4, and they can make 30, 40, 50,000. So there's guaranteed money for wrestling. There's signing bonuses for some wrestlers. There's money if they win. There's money if their team wins. There's prize money if they entertain the crowd, like the crowd votes them in. So the crowd will get the vote on extra bonuses.
What? Get out of here. That is awesome.
Fans.
I might have to get back in shape here, Tom. See if I can make the league. You know what I mean?
Well, somebody will have to draft you. Yeah.
But listen, okay, it sounds too good to be true. They got to practice year round or something, probably 3 times a week or something, right?
Yeah. So a lot of these wrestlers they'll be on an RTC, or they'll be an assistant coach, and they'll be training year round anyway. So it's just the league's in the fall, so they'll come and do their events, and they'll get paid. The reason the number is what it is because we're also going to pay them to do other things. We'll have merch royalties for them, claw royalties.
Wow.
They'll be able to do clinics. When we come into town on a tour, it's kind of like the circus coming into town in the old days. There'll be a fan fest. There'll be clinics. There'll be all kinds of things for introduction to wrestling clinics for kids who've never wrestled. So we'll go to a school. We'll take a mascot and a wrestler to a school. We'll get the kids fired up about coming out to the event, and then they can come to a free introduction to wrestling clinic and wrestle for the first time, which we've done at my old place dozens and dozens of times. And we know that gets kids to wrestle and then hopefully attend the event and become a Claw fan. But we'll pay the wrestlers to do the clinics. We'll pay them for the appearance fees to go to schools. They'll get merch. So lots of opportunities. And we want to help them build their brands too. And then once people know about them in Claw, they might watch them in freestyle, or the other events if they go into MMA, anything else that they do, it's building the athlete's brand.
Yeah. Well, okay. You just hit the nail on the head. My overall takeaway from what you just said, okay, you're getting paid to wrestle a handful of times a year. And in addition to that, you're helping build their brand. Like, it's a whole, because the bigger their brand is, the bigger Claws is. And essentially, I just love the brand angle, man. The more, I mean, because what in my opinion you need is personalities, man. Like, extravagant. I mean, you don't want to be the WWE, but you probably need a little bit of that element to it. You know what I mean? Some big personalities. Man, I love so many things that you just said.
The branding is so important on a variety of fronts. The athlete branding, the team branding we talked a little bit about earlier. You know, how do we get fans to follow teams that they don't know yet? How are we going to build those brands? And then the brand of the league. The league has to stand for something. You know, I've always felt like a great brand isn't just well known. It stands for something and people know what it means. And so what is that going to be for Claw? And for Claw, it's going to be fast paced, exciting action. And it's also going to be family friendly. We want more kids to wrestle. And so, you know, the culture will be a little different than like UFC. And there's a lot of people, as popular as UFC is, and way more popular than wrestling, but as popular as it is, there's a lot of people who don't like it, you know, because of the violence and stuff. And by the way, our sport is done in schools. Like, even if you love UFC, you're not going to go to your school and do MMA, but you can wrestle. So you have to appeal to families. We want families to feel comfortable bringing their kids to the events, that there's not going to be things that offend them and that are out of sync with their values. And I think Major League Baseball does a really good job of that. You know, you can be a hardcore fan and attend a baseball game, and it's fine. But you can also be a kid or a family who doesn't really care anything about the pierogi races or the presidents here, you know, running around the field after the fifth inning or whatever it is, and singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" and getting hot dogs and popcorn and hanging out, you know, meeting the mascots. They do so many things, you know, to engage fans and entertain families. So it's family friendly, but that doesn't mean, you know, that it's, you know, not for serious, because right next to the kids might be somebody who's betting that somebody's going to get
He's got a lot of money on this next wrestler coming up. But yeah, I mean, that's a whole other end, that end of, you mentioned kind of going on tour and these camps and these clinics for kids, to get kids engaged. Man, so many angles that I like where I'm hearing. What about any type of interest, any wrestlers that have shown interest in this league up to this point?
So we just started marketing to wrestlers. We're kind of waiting until the Olympic trials ended. And so for our event in June, we're doing this preview tournament on June 23rd in Northern Virginia. Several big name wrestlers that everybody would know have told us that they're doing it. They just haven't registered yet. So we want them to register so we can announce it, and that will attract more. But we've also talked to many D1 coaches with great programs that are going to be bringing groups of guys to the team. So we've talked to West Virginia, George Mason, American University, University of Maryland, Virginia Tech, UVA, and then we're also in touch with some of the other ones. We have a lot of Penn State connections because I'm a Penn Stater, and a lot of Penn State guys came down to our camps at our facility. And Eric Brugel was an All-American at Penn State. So we want Nittany Lion Wrestling Club guys and current Penn Staters wrestling. And then we're working on just various other people to get some big names, you know, so that the finals, which is what we're selling tickets to, you know, will be a great event. And we're sort of pulling all the stops for that. It will be a spectacle with smoke and lights and music. And Shane Sparks is announcing. Mike Mao, if you know him.
Wow. Okay.
Popular broadcaster, formerly of Flow. He'll be there interviewing athletes and part of the broadcast team. So it's going to be a great event. But we expect some big names, which we hope to announce soon. Well,
I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of big names signing up very shortly, especially after hearing this. But you did foremention you have to get drafted. So there's a free agency pool. So can you go into a little detail about the free agency pool and kind of what that means?
Yeah, one of the challenges, you know, the season doesn't last that long. It's only about a month in the fall, sort of October, November, the 5 dual meets and the playoffs. So how do we engage fans, you know, for an entire year, like, you know, solid professional sports teams do? We have an annual draft, you know, so general managers will manage the rosters of their teams, and these will ideally be high profile people with big social media followings. But they'll do a draft in the spring, about this like May-ish of each spring. And then if you don't get drafted, you go into a free agent pool. So there's 6 teams. Each team will draft 8 persons. So there's 7 weight classes, and they kind of have 1 reserve. And then if there is an injury or an illness or a weight problem or something happens, it can pull somebody out of free agency. So there'll be this pool of free agents that teams can draw on. So we're still refining the exact detailed rules on how that all works and when you can do it and that type of stuff. It's somewhat complicated, but that will be cool. But what's actually really cool is our system that we've come up with in years 2 and beyond, how you'll manage the teams. As we know, like in the NFL, a lot of people follow the salary cap and really get into that in the off season. And I would contend that most football fans really don't understand the salary cap. So just kind of in general, they do. If a team's way over the cap, they kind of, why'd they sign that person? But our system is very understandable and kind of allows you to do the same thing. Allows you to be an armchair GM. But it's all based on when you draft guys, you get the rights to them for so many number of years. So I could go into detail on that. It's easier with some graphs and charts to show. But it's this really cool system. You get to retain people that you have under long-term contract, and then you got to let the other people go if you don't. You're allowed to keep some people that aren't on long terms. But when you let them go, they go back into the draft pool. It's not like NFL where if I don't re-sign you, you can sign with any team. You go back into the draft pool. Okay. And so there's this guessing by fans and GMs of like who are they get, because they're all going to announce on the same day. We call it Declaration Day. Who they're keeping and who goes back. And you kind of got to guess. And what other is this guy going to be available? Are they going to keep him? And now here's this new guy coming up in the draft. Can he make weight though for where I need him? And so it's it's some very, real GM strategy. It's my favorite part of everything we've come up with. It's simple for anybody to understand, but it allows for endless discussions and talk show discussions and podcast discussions about what teams may do or not do. And, that's part of the off-season strategy of keeping people engaged.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at it. I mean, you're talking building a team. It's just a whole nother, another added element. One final question on the wrestlers. Are you considering or looking at any international wrestlers to be in this league?
Great question. Definitely in the long term. And there's certain, countries where wrestling is huge, where it would be awesome if some of their guys participated in this and helped spread the word internationally. So just for this event in June that we're doing, we're kind of focused on the coaches that we have relationships with and athletes that we have relationships with. But over time, more and more athletes will know about it. A lot of athletes don't know about it yet. And even if they've heard about it, they don't know the rules. They haven't seen it. That's kind of the purpose of our June event. So I think it will be the same for internationally. We're kind of focused on the United States first because those names are, most known to most people. Guys like Chamizo, though, and international guys that, at least freestyle fans know. It'd be great to bring them in, and that's definitely part of the long-term strategy.
Well, Tom, we went over a lot, and I just want to summarize the bullet points and my kind of overall takeaway here, because folks, coming up on June 23rd in Ashburn, Virginia, is the Claw Invitational. So that's where we're all going to kind of get a preview of this new professional league. So my big takeaways here, folks, bullet points: paid wrestlers, fantasy wrestling, gambling, 2.5 times the action, free agency, and just an overall increased and improved fan experience. Folks, again, June 23rd in Ashburn, Virginia. You can get tickets at WrestleClaw.com now. Can I buy shirts like that anywhere else?
We'll have shirts at the event, but we haven't made these available yet.
All right, I was going to say I'd have one by now, but I mean, come on. But Tom, I mean, final thoughts. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming and being on and talking about this, and you've made me excited.
Thanks for having me. And we just ask that the wrestling community support this and give it a chance. Boy, in any league, especially with rules, you can always criticize, and there's always things that you would do differently. But this is a real chance to finally have a professional league for the sport of wrestling. I'm pretty confident that the amount of effort and preparation that we've done, is unmatched in terms of wrestling leagues. So, but we need the wrestling community to support it. That's the core audience. And then if it does, we can grow from there. But, we appreciate everybody's support, and whether it's coming in person if you're local, or, watching the stream once it's available to get a feel for it. And then when the league launches next spring, hopefully you'll like it.
In spring of 2025, the league announces. Again, I want to thank you. This is exciting, and I'll say this, man. There may be some things about this league, folks, that you don't like entirely, but even if you're an old timer and don't like a lot of change, why would you not support this league? We're talking paid professional wrestling, and furthermore area or opportunity for wrestlers in America to then make this a career, make this a life path. And if this is successful, imagine where this league will be 5 years, 10 years from now. We're talking $30,000 to $50,000 salaries now. Could you imagine 10 years down the road? But we need the fan support, folks. I don't understand why anyone would not support this league. Tom, you made me very excited. Thanks again, Annie. Final thoughts. Thank you for being on BEG Wrestling.
No, thanks for having us.
This has been great.
We love BEG Wrestling, and we really appreciate you having us.
Hey, I appreciate you, and hey, please come on. We'll have to have you on again. So thanks again, Tom. Folks, this is BEG Wrestling. Thanks for watching.